The White Bear Area Chamber of Commerce and On Location TV19 are proud to present Your Business Matters, dedicated to your business needs. The White Bear Area Chamber is a nonprofit business organization serving as an advocate for the White Bear area and its business community. Now here is the Executive Director of the White Bear Area Chamber and the host of Your Business Matters, Tom Snell.
Welcome to the White Bear Lake Area Chamber of Commerce Your Business Matters program. And this week I'm really pleased to announce that we have Mr. Don Lutch here from SCH, short Elliot Hendrickson, an engineering firm. And we're going to be discussing some of the issues related to water usage in our community and the White Bear Lake water level. So thank you, Don, for coming to our program today.
Glad to be here.
And first of all, the first question I want to ask you is, what is short Elliot Hendrickson?
It's a consulting engineering firm. It's the oldest and largest engineering firm based in Minnesota.
Okay.
And our corporate headquarters is located in Vadnais Heights.
Great. And what is your role with the company?
I'm a water conveyance specialist, large pipes. I'm known as the big pipe guy in the company, and with lift stations, piping, pumping, and both on the water and the clean water and the dirty water side.
Okay. Well, I'm sure that you are aware of the fact that the communities around here are taking a very serious look at what's going on with the aquifer that's under White Bear Lake, and also what is happening to the level of the lake in White Bear. And I believe that your company is involved in both of those issues. Is that correct?
That is correct. We are recently were put under contract to the Met Council to evaluate the Northeast regional communities groundwater, surface water program as far as how it might affect in the future water services, domestic water, groundwater, wells, all of that.
Yeah, now, are these things that you mentioned that you're evaluating, going into that a little bit more in detail? Would that mean using other water services other than what communities now use, which is they draw water out of what's called an aquifer, right?
That is correct.
And the aquifer is what exactly?
That is one of the water-bearing layers underneath the earth that is a buried river, essentially. That's a source of water. And there's several layers, several aquifers beneath the area.
And White Bear Lake relies on one of those aquifers
that is correct.
For its water. Is that right?
Or the community itself does, yes, that is correct, as do many other communities in this immediate area.
Now, would it be safe to say that when the aquifer is full, that it brings water into the lake, and when, this is a very elementary way of looking at it, but when the aquifer is lower, that maybe water from the lake drains into the aquifer to replenish it?
That is definitely one of the theories that is being examined right now, has been by the USGS, and is part of the evaluation as far as the water appropriations that is looked at by DNR.
And the USGS is what? What is the USGS?
The United States Geological Survey.
And so they're a very reputable operation that makes these studies.
Yes, they study. That's their business, their life.
Okay, is to study things like that. And that was one of the, I believe, that was one of the conclusions that they came up with, wasn't it? During the last report, that one of the reasons that White Bear Lake is so low because the water may be going into the aquifer?
That is correct. There's more than likely a direct link between the aquifer and the lake.
Okay. And now with the Metropolitan Council, which is the organization that's studying these issues further, they've come to your company to look at things like augmenting White Bear Lake. Would that be one of them?
That's one of the things, but that is a secondary thing. We are looking at the population projection growths. We're looking at each individual community's distribution system, their well system, how that their existing facilities will match up with the future plans, future needs for water out 30 to 40 years.
Now, if we don't do anything, let's say we just keep the same process where we take water out of this aquifer that's under White Bear Lake, will it have in the future more of a dramatic impact than it has today?
Currently, the projections are for an additional 60,000 to maybe more people coming into this area in Minnesota. They're going to require additional water. That water currently would come from the aquifer. It may or may not be able to be met from St. Paul Regional Water Service or another alternative, and that could be surface water treatment.
Now, if they don't use surface water, if we keep using well water, which are going down into the aquifer, there's a potential then that communities could face some problems because of not enough water in the aquifer. Is that
There is that potential, yes.
Okay.
I mean, it's just like anyone that's on a well, dry seasons, if they're on the shallow wells, your pump may have to work harder.
But has that ever happened in Minnesota? I mean, we're the land of 10,000 lakes, you know. It's like water is an abundant resource, supposedly.
Well, back in the early 90s, there was a fairly strong amount of augmentation in the area for lakes themselves. And it was pumping water out of the lake, out of a source water, and into some of the lakes to maintain their levels. Towards the end of the 90s, that was shut down by DNR because they were monitoring the aquifer and the lake levels. Plus, there was the introduction of invasive species in the groundwater or surface water sources, and that required some of the augmentation wells to be shut down.
Okay, now moving on a little bit, I think your company was involved in augmenting a lake not too far from White Bear. Is that correct?
That would be Snell Lake in Shoreview.
Okay.
Where that lake was originally augmented by direct pumping from Sucker Lake, which is part of the St. Paul Regional Water System supply chain, and pumping water from there over to Snell Lake. That was shut down because of invasive species in the 90s. What we did there is we worked with DNR. And
DNR, the Department of Natural Resources.
Yep.
Okay.
And it took several months, but we were able to work out and come up with a solution to remove the invasive species from the supply at Sucker Lake and in fact return to pumping water into Snell Lake.
Do you do it too with Lake Gilfillan?
Lake Gilfillan in North Oaks was recently 2 years ago, we started pumping there, and this was our second year of pumping.
What's happened since you started pumping those lakes? Have they done anything, or they?
Both of those lakes have achieved their traditional normal water levels or approached their high level. I mean, the lake is regulated as far as by DNR's and our discharge permit for the systems to maintain the level to a certain set level without exceeding that.
Now, in White Bear, much larger and dynamic lake than both Snell Lake, Snell Lake and Lake Gilfillan. I mean, it's a much larger lake. I think the question I have for you is, would this type of augmenting process work on White Bear Lake, do you think?
It has the potential to work, yes, but there are a lot of questions that will have to be answered. The first and foremost is the impact on water quality.
You said you've already been able to deal with that issue with the other lakes.
For the invasive species only.
Okay.
But the source water, which is basically St. Paul's source water, would need to be evaluated for nutrients and potential disease-carrying mechanisms that would have to be evaluated. So, I mean, look at white bear. It's a beautiful fishery. It's a very, frequently used public bathing and water sport facility. That needs to be protected, and the water quality issue is going to be a critical element.
Scientifically, can that be done?
Yes.
Okay.
It can be done.
So that's number one. Okay, what other challenges are there that one would have when it comes to augmenting White Bear Lake, do you think?
Well, obviously the financial implications are foremost, and it will have a, impact on the community one way or the other. It's a significant amount of infrastructure that would have to be built from the source water, which would either be the Mississippi River, potentially the St. Croix River, or St. Paul Regional Water Supply for a source. But that source water should be in addition to the normal groundwater, surface water sources that surround the lake. I mean,
are there the water that we're talking about? The St. Croix River is kind of out of the equation, aren't they?
we are going to look at it as part of our study. Previously, several years back, I looked at the St. Croix. The St. Croix River is a lot lower elevation than where we are today in White Bear, and the cost of pumping water from the St. Croix would be considerably more than taking it out of the Mississippi. That's one part of it. The second part of it is a scenic water, historic waterway, and there's going to be more regulations and issues to deal with in pulling it from there.
Right, right.
Well, part of our study with Met Council is to look at the potential of using St. Croix
and then
water.
the other would be the St. Paul water system.
St. Paul water system, both taking treated water from St. Paul out of their current system, and we'll be meeting with St. Paul next week to go over what they have as far as available capacity from their treatment plant. But then there's also the ability to look at their source water. I mean, they have raw water flowing through the North Oaks community and the Pleasant Lake into Sucker Lake and on down through the Vadnais Chain to Rice Street treatment plant. Taking water out of there is a potential source.
When you mention potential source, taking raw water out, but if it's treated water, we don't have to do anything with it. Is that right? If it's just treated water, it can come right into the lake.
It surely could, but it'd be very expensive.
Oh, it would be?
Yes, very expensive, because you're talking many, many millions of gallons to take it, to treat it, the water, the consumption water quality level, whereas the raw water will be at somewhat of a lesser grade.
Lesser grade, but potentially treatable and could be. So if the money is there, the solutions are probably available.
Yes.
Okay. Now, would bringing water into the lake, is that kind of a Band-Aid solution? I mean, is that a long-term thing? If we don't do anything else, what will that have an effect, or will that all just drain down into the aquifer?
The DNR issued a report back in the 90s that talked about White Bear Lake and the effects of the lake. And one of the state paragraphs in their report, they talked, is there any other lakes in the state of Minnesota like White Bear? And there's approximately 50 large lakes in the state that have long-term fluctuation in the water, and in excess of 5 to 6 feet, 7 feet. And augmentation is a solution. The impacts of it can be mitigated. I guess that's what I want to say. The long-term cost of that, has a lot as far as when you start looking at the influences of our weather itself. I mean, if we could get away from the dry summers, it would be a much easier solution because we're
Right.
wet springs, some winter snow melt, and then the fall, like we've had this year, has been fairly good.
I never thought I'd ever be praying for another snowfall like we had, I think, back in the 1990 over the Halloween time period.
Yes.
To help
Yep.
to help fill the lake up. But I want to ask about some other types of solutions. This is a comprehensive problem or challenge
Correct.
that we have. It's going to take a lot of different communities working together to find a
Yes.
solution.
That's correct.
And the solutions would be, what would some of the things be that we could actually not only solve the problems of White Bear Lake, but make sure that we're going to have a healthy supply of water going into the future? What's out there that can be used that isn't being used? What are some variables?
The larger community areas in the Twin City Metroplex is one of the larger communities that has a significant amount of groundwater as source water. You look at the other major communities across the country, they're almost all on surface water treatment.
Oh, okay.
They're using their rivers or their large lakes as source water. And there's proven technologies for surface water treatment, just like there is for groundwater treatment. But what is going to be one of the problems is each of the small communities are somewhat autonomous right now.
Right.
They're independent. Their treatment facilities, their distribution facilities are their own. They're not part of a regional facility like St. Paul Regional Water was. But I look back when Hill and Gilfillan and Rice got together the turn of the 1890s and 1900s, they had this idea of providing a water system to St. Paul and this area. They were visionaries. I think that's what it's going to take now, is a group of visionaries that talk conservation, talk good, sound public health and engineering to solve this problem.
Would it be safe to say that if we do these things, if we look to go to surface water around our area, that not only our region, but Minnesota could become a real leader as being a water-rich state with a resource that in the future will be exceedingly valuable?
I mean, that is a great goal, in my opinion. I look at what's happening right now. The Twin Cities is putting more water into the Mississippi River as it leaves the community than it takes out.
And I understand that there's a lot of excess water that we could use out of the Mississippi that we aren't using without really affecting the river.
That's, one of the things that has to be part of the ultimate study is what is the appropriation that will not that will not affect the river. That's something that we will be looking at. I mean, St. Paul looks at that strategically. I mean, they know what their appropriation limit is currently versus where they're operating
But
today.
it would be safe to say that there's considerable water in the Mississippi that could be used without really affecting.
That's correct.
And that our area could be well served by looking at that as an alternative.
I mean, yes, but the same thing that's going to carry on forward, Tom, is conservation. St. Paul Regional Water talks conservation. They restrict lawn watering in the summertime when the demand is extremely high. That practice will have to continue. And the use of water, reduction throughout our appliances in our house, that sort of thing, is going to have to continue as well.
Well, I appreciate you coming out to talk to us today about this really important subject, and if people are interested in our Chamber's water conservation program, you can contact us by emailing Tom at the White Bear Area Chamber of Commerce.com, doing your part to save the lake. That's a water conservation program that the Chamber has undertaken. And again, I want to thank you, Don, and all the wonderful work that Short Elliot Hendrickson is doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom.
You've been watching Your Business Matters. For more information on this program or the White Bear Area Chamber, visit www.whitebearchamber.com or call 651-429-8593.